Hi, I'm Jerry Turnquist.
Jerry?
And we're just kind of reminiscing a little bit about the family.
Oh.
How are you?
Hey.
Jenny Adsit is my guest today.
Nice to meet you. You look gorgeous. Yeah, great. Thank you. Good taste.
Kent, my son, has a silver baptismal bowl he wants to give to you. I hope he does. And that he's coming here.
Okay.
He always remembers those back in the 70s. He used to go to the joiner room.
Rewinding it and replaying it.
Exactly.
Taking pictures.
Just ignore me.
Yeah. Thanks for doing.
Yeah.
So glad your mom said that you might come. So I'm so glad. Is she here too? She should be coming. I'm prepared.
Did you get a mailing?
Yes, yeah, we did. Okay, right.
Oh, if anybody wants to add their address?
Oh, I got a mailing. So I don't need to
No, you can do
My daughter Erin.
You're a teacher of
anybody.
Athletics or something.
Can you hold this so I can get signed in? You got it?
You can go back in.
Right here, baby.
Now this window is very cool. So,
Look at the camera here.
well, I'm sorry.
You don't have to.
Okay.
Well, you had good enough weather yesterday then.
Do you want to stand right here and try another shot?
All right, we'll try it.
A different perspective.
Sure.
Yeah.
And name tag and lunch is served, so just smoke your How's Minnie Mouse today? Oh my gosh,
You guys have one of
Is
these?
your name Minnie McCornack?
You should take one for your
It sounds like it goes. Alina?
last but not least.
Yeah, there was names for judges and
Aiken's were out there
statesmen.
too.
Yeah. That's right. Stuart Aiken. All four.
Oh, really?
Kind of the last of your heads.
Oh, and you have alpacas too.
Such cool pictures.
One right up here.
Someone find the signer? Does anyone see it?
I'm not even sure the woman certainly would. Well, I've told Vicki I want her information.
No.
Right. Quick, march.
$4 an acre or something. Oh, that was West Side. Isaac Patterson, West Side. I read the West Side. They were back in their little tent.
Do they allow corrections to be submitted?
There is a place to do that.
I think he likes my face.
Yeah.
I think he's interested in this.
I don't do that.
She's ignoring me.
Oh, is she?
You know, you are.
Oh, I am?
Andrew, 1917. She died of
Really?
Elizabeth Fraser. Wait, why record that brief that was, I said, could I turn it in? I didn't put it in heck of I brought a picture of my dad and a couple of other things, and they're terrible pictures, but I would do it.
Daylight savings time. You go ahead.
You can go ahead and ignore me.
Yeah, I just didn't want you. I'll back out.
Oh, I like that.
Just went up to the market yesterday.
Take your time.
And then
Okay, I'll tell Paul when he gets here. I don't know why he's late.
You know, that's, he might be in the church. To me, that was great.
So what year? 68? Yeah.
How'd you find out about this?
You guys.
Yeah. I don't know.
He's like a big historian.
Right. And he's the one who first came out with all kinds of things.
I'd like to welcome everyone to the 100th annual meeting on this 175th anniversary of the founding of the old church. This place is so special to all of us because it connects us to the land and to each other. We would like to thank you for being here today. Who do you think's traveled the farthest? I heard somebody from DC.
Rhode Island.
Okay. Oregon? Maryland. Maryland?
Texas, New York,
Texas?
Carolina,
Wow.
Seattle.
All right. We came about 10 miles. Thank
about
you.
5.
I want to introduce myself. I'm Jody Schmeck. I'm the president of the Board of Trustees of the Memorial Washington Reformed Presbyterian Church, which is the body that administers this historical church and cemetery. We'll open our annual meeting by singing America the Beautiful under the direction of Paul Chenard. officers and members of the Board of Trustees and ask them to stand as their name, well, I can't talk today, as their names are read. And please stand up and face the audience if you would. Vice President is Paul Chenard. Secretary Sue Reset. Treasury Sexton Ken Tepel. Kevin Lonergan isn't able to be with us today. Tam Lonergan. Rod Mason. Bill McCornack. Kathy Paradise. Scott Damish. Scott might be in the, oh, there he is. Yeah, and Scott McQueen. Our historians are Sue Simonson and Maureen Kelly. You probably met them in the family history tent. They're a little busy today. Just want to tell you that this is a totally committed group. We meet numerous times during the year, and especially this last year, we met a lot. Everyone's very involved. And I just want to thank each and every one of you for your invaluable work and dedication to the old church. Just want to thank those of you who helped clean the church for today's meeting. This always happens the Saturday before the Sunday when we meet. A special thanks to Ken Tepel for arranging for the window cleaners and for dusting the old church. And to Bill McCornack for bringing his generator and for because we don't have any power out here. To Rob Mason, Scott McQueen, and Scott Damish for placing flags on the graves of the veterans. We started planning for this event about 5 years ago. Sue Simonson started doing research on the founding families. She met Maureen Kelly, who had done research as well, and they just really took off. Between the two of them, we have an excellent resource for tracing our common family history. Kathy Paradise did save the date magnets, which helped us all get here on time. And as always, she did the announcement letter. She does a wonderful job. Bill McCornack and Ken Tepel made sure that the fence was power washed. The old church has had some touch-up painting, and the landscaping is in the best shape it's ever been in. Tam Lonergan and Scott McQueen put their heads together and came up with a digital picture show for you. You probably saw that in the family history tent. If you didn't, please see it after the service. Scott Damish made sure that we had a King County Sheriff's Deputy who was on duty for traffic control, and Sue Brissett took on the task of coming up with games to entertain the kids. So you may have seen them running around doing the old church scavenger hunt and beanbag toss. And as usual, Paul Chenard will provide us with beautiful music. Sue will now read the minutes from our 2015 annual meeting.
June 7th, 2015. The 99th annual meeting and memorial service and the 174th anniversary of the founding of this church was called to order by Jody Schmeck, President. Kathy Chenard Hasmonic, Jennifer Youngdahl Griffin, and Paul Chenard led the congregation in the singing of America the Beautiful. Jody then welcomed the congregation and introduced the other officers and trustees. She also thanked everyone who helped clean the church in preparation for the annual meeting, with special thanks to Ken Tepel, Bill McCornack, Rob Mason, Scott McQueen, and Scott Damish. Special thanks to Whitney Nims for providing the flower arrangements. The secretary then read the minutes from the 2014 meeting. The minutes were approved as read. Ken Tepel then gave the treasurer's report. The audit committee, Rob Mason reported that the books were in proper order. Scott McQueen, on the nominating committee, presented the list of nominees for 3-year terms as trustees. The nominees were Paul Chenard, Scott Damish, Kevin Lonergan, and Rob Mason. It was moved and seconded to accept these nominations by acclamation. Motion passed. Sue Simonson, as the historian, mentioned that the history of the founding families is being worked on for the 100th service. Building and Grounds Committee, Bill McCornack reported that landscaping was completed in the area of the columbarians and 2 red maples were planted on the grounds. Jody Schmeck mentioned that there will be a special celebration next year to commemorate the 100th annual meeting and memorial service. She also mentioned that Lest We Forget is available free of charge and that Old Church stationery is available for $3 a pack. Jody asked anyone in need of monument cleaning to please let us know. She also reminded everyone to sign the guest book so that we have current addresses on file. Also, artificial plants and flowers are not permitted at grave sites. The business meeting was then adjourned. Jody Schmeck then introduced Craig Mason, our guest speaker. Paul Chenard, Kathy Chenard Hasmonic, and Jennifer Youngdahl Griffin led the congregation in the singing of the hymn Faith of Our Fathers, which was followed by the invocation. The offertory was collected by Haley and Alyssa McQueen, while the pastoral prayer by L. von Beethoven was played by Paul Chenard. The scripture reading was from Philippians chapter 4. The secretary then read the memorial service roll call for those who served their country in the military and for those who had passed on in the last year. The roll call was followed by the playing of taps and its echo by Brendan Berg from Larkin High School. Next, Craig Mason gave a sermon telling us that our ancestors paved the way for us to be here. They had the faith to come here to make better lives for their families. When we reflect on our past, it helps us to be faithful. We closed with the singing of A Morning is Broken and then followed the benediction. The congregation then joined family and friends on the front lawn for refreshments and fellowship. Respectfully submitted, Susan Gage, Secretary.
Thank you, Sue. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? If none, I declare the minutes approved as approved as read. I don't know. Okay. We will now have the treasurer's report from Ken Tebow.
May 1, 2015 to April 30th, 2016. Income, 2015 annual meeting collection, $1,765. Sale of lots, $15,400. Other contributions, $1,920. Investment loss, $3,634, with a total income of $15,451. Expenses, annual meeting expenses, $3,312. Maintenance of grounds, $16,460. Insurance, $2,262. Other expenses, $2,463, for total expenses of $24,497. Net expense over revenue, $9,046.
Thank you, Ken. Ken Tebow, Rob Mason, Scott Damish, and myself are on the Financial Oversight Committee. Rob, could you give us your report?
Thanks, Jody. We reviewed the books and records and found everything to be in proper order.
The Board of Trustees is elected at this annual meeting. Trustees are elected for 3-year terms. 3 members have terms that expire this year. They are Ken Tebow, Bill McCornack, and myself. The nominating committee consists of Tam Lonergan, Kathy Paradise, and Scott McQueen. We would now like to hear from Scott McQueen, chairperson of the nominating committee.
Thank you, Kathy. The nominating committee would like to nominate Ken, Bill, and Jody.
Really seems like an inside job, doesn't it? Sorry about that. May I have a motion to accept the nominations by acclamation?
So moved.
Can I hear a second? Second. Thank you. The motion has been accepted. Oh, I'm sorry. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Lucas, where are you? He always says no. Oh, good. The motion has been accepted. Thank you. Officers are elected by the Board of Trustees immediately following the meeting. Just a few announcements. The newsletter, we just need your change of address if you've had one. You signed in when you came in today, so we review that, and we really appreciate you doing that. The other thing we're doing this year that's a little bit different is we're doing a group picture. That's thanks to Kathy and Jerome Foss and Christopher. And so immediately after the memorial service, if you would line up in front of the old church, we're going to take a group photo, which will really be nice. Just another announcement, those green booklets, lest we forget, are free. So if you didn't receive one or you would like another one, please feel free to pick one up on the greeting table. We do have stationery available. There are 10 note cards in each packet, and they're $3 a packet. And again, artificial flowers, please refrain from using those if you would. We appreciate that. I'd like to declare this 100th annual meeting of the Old Church adjourned, and we'll now commence the memorial service. Oh, I'm sorry, yes, building and grounds. Forget it, we're now adjourned.
Hi folks, I'm Bill McCornack. We've only had a few things we did. Is this even coming in outside? Is it? Oh, it is. Yes, you're not, I guess. A few things done this year. We did weed and feed in the whole lawn, and the grass looks way better than that weed patch we've had for years. So 10 people line that up with our building and grounds people that mow and trim everything. So the grass looks just wonderful. The other thing we did, if you notice, is a large tree out front missing. We finally took that down because we're just in fear of a windstorm. This was in the path if it should fall, so we finally removed that big tree. It was a cottonwood, wasn't it, Ken? Mm-hmm. Yeah, big cottonwood. Anyway. And then we power washed the fence because every year we get some mold and mildew on the PVC fence. So we make sure it's nice and clean for everybody to see it. And just a quick word about our bagpipers and drummers that are here. They're out of Dundee, Illinois. It's Sean McDonald and his 2 twin daughters on drum. There's a bass, a snare, and a tenor drum. And then the son Ian is on one of those drums. And then the second piper is a friend of the family, I guess. They're in a big organization. Just so happens that they are all going to Glasgow, Scotland this August for the World Championships of bagpiping. So we got a real first-class crew here, guys. So that's my report. I'll get back to Jody.
Thanks, Bill, and sorry. Okay, now we're officially adjourned. We're in the business meeting. Fear not death. We are destined to die. We share it with all who ever lived, with all who ever will be. Bewail the dead, hide not your grief, do not restrain your mourning. But remember that continuing sorrow is worse than death. When the dead are at rest, let their memory rest and be consoled. As a drop of water in the sea, as a grain of sand on the shore, are a person's few days in the world. The good things in life last for limited days, but a good name endures forever. Please read the first reading with me. To everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under heaven. A time to be born, and a time to die. A time to plant, and a time to flower. A time to kill, and a time to heal. A time to break down, and a time to build up. A time to weep, and a time to laugh. A time to mourn, and a time to dance. A time to cast away stones, and a time to gather stones together. A time to embrace, and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to seek, and a time to lose. A time to keep, and a time to cast away. A time to rend, and a time to sow. A time to keep silence, and a time to speak. A time to love, and a time to hate. A time of war, and a time of peace. These words of an ancient biblical preacher remind us that human life and death, human strivings, human pleasures, and human pain are but a passing part of the cycle of nature. The occurrence of death brings home to us the common destiny of all who share the adventure of life upon this precious earth. Death draws us together and reminds us of our essential kinship, not only to the family of humanity, but to the natural world that sustains us with its gifts, stirs us with its beauty, and stamps the inevitable pattern of birth, growth, and death upon every living thing. Each of us leaves a mark upon the earth and lives on in the memory of those we knew. Although every living thing perishes, life persists. Although every person dies, humankind survives. We are, each of us, greater than ourselves. We receive our inheritance. We leave our legacy. Here today, we affirm that despite the tragedy inherent in living, it is good to be alive. Let us rejoice in this day, in all our days, aware that they are too brief, too few, too precious to be wasted. We understand that there can be no love without loss, no joy without sorrow. May we have the courage to accept all of life, the love and the loss, the joy and the sorrow, as we remember. Please stand and we'll sing Faith of Our Fathers.
I was looking for a poem appropriate for this. I thought, oh, Carl Sandburg, he's from Illinois. So I went to the library and I got a book of poetry and I opened the thing. By goodness, there's a poem called Illinois Farmer. So I said, oh, this looks very appropriate. Bury this old Illinois farmer with respect. He slept the Illinois nights of his life after days of work in Illinois cornfields. Now he goes on a long sleep. The wind he listened to in the corn silk and the tassels, the wind that combed his red beard in 0 mornings when the snow lay white on the yellow ears in the bushel basket at the corn crib. The same wind will now blow over the place here where his hand must dream of Illinois corn. Thank you, Carl Sandburg.
Thank you, Paul.
stand for the memorial service roll call. And please remain standing for taps and its echo following the roll call. For those who have served their country in the military, and for those who have passed on during the past year. W.J. Christie, Robert Aiken, John Fraser, William Fraser, Norton Harper, John Hunter, Henry Irish, Andrew McCornack, Willwood McCornack, W.F. McCornack, Adam Widener, James Moore, John A. McQueen, Robert Hilton, Dr. Kenneth Hood, John A. Jawalski, Elmer Troon, Kenneth W. Cramp, Carl M. Geister, Robert E. McCornack, Warren H. Reese, Kenneth McCornack, Wallace H. McCornack, Fred Sorensen, Herbert Raymond Damish, John T. Mason, William C. Troon, Opal Silkwood, Robert John Tegmeyer, Walter Raff, Ross C. Connors, John P. Van Arsdale, Louis Kelly, John Bellows, John Darley, Phil Winsek, Ingram Mace Heron, Raymond Williams, Laverne Page, Richard Hitzman, David Mischie, Kenneth Mendenhall, Richard McCornack, George Freeberg Jr., William M. Fraser, William McQueen Freeberg, Robert McCornack Gage, Mary Ada Cox Gage, Russell G. Schmidt, Carrie Allen Thomas, Kenneth Shaw, Roland M. Holtz, Arnold Ehlers, Everett Lloyd Milhorn, John Runge, Henry J. Becker, Robert A. Kenyon, John T. Rayburn, Gerald H. Ranking, Reverend Willis A. Reed, Raymond Husky Jr., Thomas L. Lonergan, Donald E. Rosborough, John M. Smith, Charles C. Bach, Donald L. Clute, Harold F. Wharton, Paul W. Turner, Robert H. Druell, J. Michael Essex, Jerome P. Hastert, Robert J. Poor, George Donald Carter, Laverne A. Troon, William M. Damish, Irving Kuntz, Ronald L. Shuby Sr., Donald R. Stewart, George L. Gallant, Theodore Kogan, Alphonse Barron, Robert Stringer, Kenneth L. Turneau, Wendell R. Fullman, Harold Lang, Clifford C. McBride, Jane H. Johnson, Robert F. Mason, John L. Snyder, Bernard Medina, Roland Brissett, Anton Schumann, Leonard L. Wood, Delmer Q. Reel, Robert J. Bondron, Russell D. Damish, Roy K. Pearson, Robert J. Picerno Jr., Harold L. Stocker, Robert McCornack Freeberg, Stuart B. McQueen, Anton D. Schumann, Neil Chanette, Lawrence Flavin, Robert M. Damish, Gordon D. Howard, John Lipscomb, Arlene C. Ullman, Lola E. Childs, Gloria Clark, Richard Mark Damish, Edith Yamsch, Roseanne Holtz, Grayson T. Hoppy, Daniel Howell, Jean G. Leitner, Walter M. Leitner, John Lipscomb, Dolores Lipscomb, Stella Paul, Dorothy Poor, William P. Shaw, Mavis A. Steinmeier, Betty Lou Tappenden, Leslie E. Terrell, and Timothy J. Westman.
Please be seated.
Good afternoon, everyone. As I was sitting there listening to everything I was going to say, it's such a delight to be a part of this service today. And then as it went on and I heard the music and the anticipation and the audience and your involvement, I realized it's really more of an honor to be a part of your service today. And also sitting here, it reminds me of the little church I grew up in. I actually started out in Normal, Illinois. My parents taught at the university, and we attended a little church. It wasn't much bigger than this. Now, we did have electricity and plumbing. And there was a basement, but actually my dad, with several other members of the church, they took turns delivering the sermon each week. They had all, although they weren't ministers themselves, they had studied divinity and so on. And it's interesting how those experiences that we have in our lives stay with us. Not only do I remember the intimacy of that church and how I felt, but I also remember the potlucks and Blanche Dunbar's best donuts that I had ever eaten in my life. And today, as I share with you some of the stories of this church, and I'm sure many of you know them, I'm going to ask you to think about your own journeys and how you ended up here. I would be curious, so I think you asked this at the beginning, but is this a first-time event for anybody here then? You people? How many of you have attended regularly more than 5 years? How about 10 years? 20 years? All right, I won't go any further because it'll show you. I want to thank Kathy Paradise for inviting me to speak today. I'm a dramatic book reviewer. I bring books to life. Every year I do 2 or 3 new best-selling biographies. I do them in character and costume. And today it isn't really a book that I'm dramatizing. I'm really more of a conduit by which I'm going to share the information that Kathy and the other group of people found with the history of this church. And it's been really fun for me to read about your history. Some of the most remarkable journeys do not begin with the final destination in mind. And it's truly miraculous how life finds a way of carrying us to distant places, seemingly worlds away from where we began. And when we explore the expeditions of others, we're able to reflect on our own lives and develop a greater sense of where we've been. And when we look at these stories today, I think one theme tends to reemerge, that in all of our lives, we all feel at some point that we don't know exactly where we're going. Uncertainty of where life is taking us is a theme, however, that ties us all together. And it's part of what makes our journey so remarkable and enduring. So the stories that I'm going to tell you today are really a collection of journeys. People who traveled from faraway places, as some of you did today, from Maryland and other places. And I know that oftentimes those people that, in our history, in our own lives, we feel that uncertainty when we're going someplace new. But at the same time, when we're forced to face those kinds of things, it creates in us stories of love, faith, and perseverance, culminating in today, the church, the very church that you all are sitting in. The first story I'd like to tell you is a more recent story, somewhat serendipitous. And it began in Southern Oregon in 2005. Scott and Shannon McQueen and their 9-month-old daughter, Haley, moved from Medford, Oregon to Huntley, Illinois, following a job looking for a place to plant their roots. And shortly after their 2,000-mile relocation to an area of the country with no known family relations, although Scott noticed it had a lot of corn, Scott's grandfather, Stuart Duke McQueen, indicated that, hey, you know what? Some of our ancestors might have passed through that Elgin area. And he offered up a little bit of genealogy. And the search was on. And the McQueens discovered records confirming residence and the resting place of their ancestors in Illinois. However, the information was not very specific. It simply said Washington Cemetery in the Chicago area. And after an extensive search through many different churchyards throughout Chicagoland, they finally found the one they were looking for. It was, as fate would have it, less than a 10 minutes drive from their home in Huntley. And so what started out as a simple Sunday drive to an old church resulted in a reconnection to a rich history and a greater appreciation of their family's American story. So they drove here, and what did they find? Well, we're sitting in it, right? A charming one-room church. And then they found out that there was going to be a service held the first Sunday of June, just a few short weeks away. Not knowing what to expect, they attended that memorial service, and they discovered an amazing community of people who embraced their common ancestry and welcomed them. And little did Scott and his family know when they came to Huntley that the roots they hoped to plant had been growing here for more than 150 years. An uncertain journey to an old church led to the discovery of an incredible history and an open-armed community. And this journey is just one of the many fascinating stories that this small but significant building has been a part of. So during today's service, I ask all of you to reflect on your own lives. How does your old church story begin? What's the journey that led you here today? Let's go back in time just a little bit. Today we're going to go back and look at some of our founding families. You're going to hear the name McCornack a lot. That's because that's what we have a lot of documents available about them. You're not going to hear as much about the women for the same reason. Through letters, family chit-chat, historical research, and even Google, we can piece together this amazing story of faith, love, hope, and passion. So let's go back to 1817. We have Andrew McCornack. He was born in the Galloway area of Scotland on a farm near Annabuglish. Or do you say Annabuglish? Andrew was the fifth child and youngest son of Andrew McCornack and Helen McGowan. The McCornacks came to America, like many other immigrants, for the opportunity of a better economic life free from church interference. And in June of 1838, Andrew's parents, along with his brother Alexander and sister Janet, sailed to New York, and the vessel was named Siddons. It was operated by a certain Captain Alex Britton. And Alex was so amazed by how many ships he saw that he immediately sent off a letter to his aunt and uncle who were still in Scotland. And he said, if you were here, you would see more ships in 1 hour than you would ever see with the prospect from the hills of Cornwall in 50 years. But that journey across the Atlantic was long. They were at sea when they crowned Queen Victoria. That took place in June, and they were still at sea on the Atlantic on July 4th. They happened to be sailing on an American ship, which the captain had rigged out with stars and stripes. It was rumored that the captain mentioned something about the Brits and Yankees in 1776, but the details were sketchy. The McCornacks landed in the port of New York on July 19, 1838, and made a beeline to Croton Point, New York, where George McQueen and his wife lived. Within a week, pretty fast, Andrew landed a job as a joiner for 10 shillings per day. Anybody know what a joiner does? So if you look it up on Wikipedia, a joiner is a craftsman who builds things by joining pieces of wood, usually producing items such as doors, windows, stairs, and tables. A pretty solid resume to help build a church like this one. After arriving, Alexander wrote the following letter on July 23rd to his aunt and uncle who remained in Scotland. He said, Dear Aunt and Uncle, it is with feelings of gratitude that I take my pen to inform you that we are all well at present. Okay, every letter back then started with, we are all well at present. Thanks be to God for it, and I hope this will find you in the same state. We left Liverpool on the 16th of June at 6 o'clock in the evening, and we were towed out about 20 miles by a steamer, and the next morning we were a little west to the Isle of Man. We came round the west of Scotland as the wind was more favorable. We arrived at Staten Isle on the 18th of the month. The surgeon came on board to examine the state of the passengers in the vessel and found them in good health and the vessel clean. Then we hoisted sail and came up to New York and lodged in the city that night. We went back to the ship the next day to gather our trunks. George McQueen, Andrew McCornack's brother-in-law, met us, and we went with him for the night. They've not found a situation for us yet, but we intend to go farther west if we are spared under divine providence and try to get a place to settle, as there is plenty of land both to let and sell. Mother and Janet will stop here till we find a place, for it would be in vain for them to travel the woods. Signed, Alexander McCornack. Father Andrew and his two brothers, Andrew and Alexander, struck out for Illinois by taking a boat up Old Erie Canal to Buffalo, New York. They caught a sailing vessel around the lakes, landing in Chicago in the latter part of July in 1838. They would have taken an airplane, Kathy told me, but dealing with ye old TSA was a real hassle. Kathy is feeling really good about that joke now. In Chicago, they met an early day settler named Cyrus Larkin, who owned a lumber wagon and a team, and for a whopping $1.25 each, they caught a ride 40 miles west to Elgin, Illinois, where they saw a country of prairie and woodland. This area reminded them of their native homeland, with rolling hills and trees to be used for fencing and firewood. The land was also close to the post office, flour mill, and other useful stores like the blacksmith. They still had to make their own coffee, however, as the ubiquitous Starbucks had not yet made their appearance. After fording the river, the three went out west on what later became Highland Avenue. About 6 miles west, they found an early settler who had claimed 160 acres with a log house on it, for which he asked $125. Alexander and Andrew, they wanted to look around the country some more, but the father said, "No, sons, I am tired. It's been a long journey." And as he had the money, they sealed the deal. And this claim became their home. This particular piece of property we're speaking of is the property that surrounds us today. Speaking of purchasing land, I want to tell you a little funny side story. Maybe it's not so funny if you're Mr. William Moore, who happens to be one of the founding members. On May 3rd, 1844, while working in his field, William Lynch spied his brother-in-law, William Moore, walking by. He looked very determined. William said, "Where are you going, William?" He discovered that old Mr. Moore was walking to Chicago to the land office to purchase 80 acres. However, this was the same plot of land that Mr. Lynch was hoping to purchase. The race was on. Mr. Lynch made some hasty financial preparations to go to Chicago as well. He walked all night to get there, and the minute the door opened in the morning, he bought that piece of land. Poor Mr. Moore, on the other hand, had stopped for the night and missed the land offer. It became a first-come, first-served situation and inspired the plot to the original Fast and Furious movie. I guess our ancestors weren't all angels after all. Perhaps you would have liked to have been a fly on the wall at their next family reunion. So the immigration to Kane County was pretty much completed by 1839, including Margaret and George McQueen, who left New York, where they had settled 3 years earlier in Plato Township. Perusing through many, many personal letters and newspaper articles in the archives, we found some interesting observations about their new life as pioneers in Elgin. One person indicated, with respect to the seasons, we had a rather cold and wet spring and summer. Some things haven't changed. But had a fine harvest and a good crop of wheat, corn, potatoes, and oats. The early frost hurt some of the roots, such as beets and turnips and many other vegetables which are not common in Scotland. The winter has been moderate, with the exception of a few days where the thermometer dipped down to 32 degrees below zero. We are increasing our stock. We have 10 cows, 2 of them calved and the rest in calf. We have a yoke of oxen, a bull, and a pair of horses for which we paid $150. For dinner, there's salt and fresh meat and tea. There are puddings and pies, sugar we make ourselves. The women do all the cooking. Some things never change. And it ended with, and there's no oatmeal in this country. Okay, well, that wasn't exactly true. Our ancestors missed their oatmeal so much that they kept talking about it in all the letters they sent back home, over and over again. One family, when they returned to Scotland, they were visiting, and there they were enjoying their big bowls of oatmeal. They picked up the packaging and read, "Hey, it's from Dundee, Illinois." One newspaper article reported, with respect to the markets, farm produce was generally low priced. Wheat from 40 to 50 cents, corn from 25 to 30, and oats from 18 to 20. You ask how a farmer can live off these prices. One source noted, there are two things that helped the farmer in 1838. The rich land produced abundant crops without manure, and the farmer didn't have rent to pay, and the poor were not oppressed with a corn bill. Just a little FYI about farmers. George A. Freeburg, inventor of the seed disinfector, I'd never heard of that before, had you? Is buried right outside, as is Herbert McCornack. Herbert was a farm boy engineer with an idea. His crudely built but highly innovative milking machine was turned down by several manufacturers before it was picked up by the Babsons and became the highly successful Surge Milker. Their advertising slogan read, "The real tug and pull of the calf." And since we're talking about accomplished old church people, let me introduce you to, a woman, Martha McQueen. She was described in the 1919 Omaha paper as, I quote, "a young worker of rare talent and charm, blazing one of these new trails where she holds the enviable position of chemist at the Cudahy Packing Company. And every day, you can find her in the huge laboratory weighing and testing our food so it may be as pure as the golden sunshine." Miss McQueen was most enthusiastic, and her advice to young women at the time was this: "I urge young feminists to follow the guideposts marked earnest endeavor, as I have run the course and found the prize well worth the effort." Yet another great inventor in connection to the old church is Robert M. Gage. He invented the plasma arc welding process, which ended up revolutionizing the welding industry and is widely used throughout the world today. Regarding education, it goes without saying that it was important, and knowing that makes the following note from one of the archived letters so funny. The note said, "In the winter of 1862, I attended school with Henry Rockwell as teacher and attempted to study algebra, but neither the teacher nor the student knew much about it, so it wasn't a big success." In contrast to that school scenario, St. Charles Community High School memorialized Lois McCornack in 1946 by naming the classroom in which she taught after her. And the Board of Education refurnished and redecorated it with 10 scenes of the life of Abraham Lincoln. She must have been an admirer. And Miss McCornack's obituary read like this: "Always popular with the students because of her high scholarship, broad sympathies, deep understanding, delightful sense of humor, and personal charm." Another article mentions Lois's parents, Charles S. and Miss Martha S. Rao. Their wedding announcement appeared in the paper in 1902, and it read like this: "The house was prettily decorated, the ring service was used, and after the ceremony, a very choice luncheon was served. Mr. and Mrs. McCornack left on a wedding trip and will return to a newly furnished home on Walnut Avenue." Another interesting obituary is that for Alexander McCornack. Listen to the way this reads. "At 4 o'clock in the morning of the first day of February, 1888, the life work of Alexander McCornack was finished. Death came and wrapped him in her mantle as kindly as a mother could her babe. He held the office of road commissioner for several years and was often appointed arbitrator, as his judgment was appreciated and his honesty never doubted. He died ripe in age, mature in thought, replete with good works, with a perfect faith in Christ and a strong hope of never-ending joy in a life to come." But one of the most heartwarming letters was written by Richard M. McCornack of Chicago, May 7, 1946, to Mrs. Agnes Fraser, who was residing in Scotland. Although they never met, the main content of the letter was talking about their family connections, sorting through the generations, trying to find a blood link. And toward the end of the letter, the topic turned to the comparison between the strictly rationed items of food and clothing in Scotland compared to the relative plenty of those items in America. And so Richard wrote to her, "I would consider it a real pleasure as well as a gesture of friendship to our cousins across the sea if I could be of service in obtaining for you any items of non-perishable food or clothing." I guess that kind of sentiment in that letter is a testament to the bond of love and selflessness that is shared by the members of our church community. Connecting with family and supporting them in their time of need and uncertainty is what makes this land, the church, and its people so special. And it's through a family that we learn the values of love, trust, faith, and hope, because a strong foundation comes from being a supportive family. Many, or most of you here are related to families who put their heart and their souls into this church back in the early 1800s. One should thank God for all that we have been fortunate enough to inherit, as having a family who cares and loves us is truly the greatest blessing. Many psalms of praise and prayers of thanksgiving were heard in the humble log cabins of our founding fathers' families. They were religious people, and the church was an integral part of their lives. The faith of our fathers was not overlooked, as religion was paramount to them. Faith was their help. It was their shield in those days of discouragement and struggle. On the 17th of February, 1841, a fellowship meeting was held in the home of Alexander McCornack, where all different members, both family and Christian neighbors, gathered to discuss the organization of a church. This very church that we're attending today. The old church was organized in 1841, and the construction of the building began in 1844 or maybe 1845. This beautiful piece of land that surrounds us today was donated by Alexander McCornack. The timber used for this church was hewn in the woods nearby, and other lumber was hauled by oxen from Chicago. It was erected under the supervision of William and Daniel Fraser and designed like the one they attended in Scotland. Even the laths and shingles were hand-cut by the members whose very souls and beings were built into this structure, which has since become a permanent memorial to their faith, their courage, and their convictions. The final touch of Mr. William Fraser's hand was the placing of the sundial above the door, which it still faithfully marks off the hours. These faithful and courageous people attended regularly here until September 9th, 1916. 100 years ago, in 1916, the Washington Cemetery Association was formed and the once-a-year memorial services began, hence the reason for our centennial celebration. And so today, we honor the journeys of our founding families, who in times of uncertainty were guided by faith, love, and tradition. They left us with a strong, loving community, this beautiful churchyard as a reminder of their incredible story. Let us now stand for the roll call one more time. William Hood, Andrew McCornack, Samuel Eakin, George Atchison, Edward Riley, John Shedden, Robert Lowry, Alexander Gibson, James Moore, James Hanna, Stuart Eakin, John Hunter, Stuart Christie, William Eakin. You may be seated.
Please stand for Amazing Grace. Just testing. As we come together again in the sadness of farewell, we turn our thoughts to yesterday, to a world that lives only in memory. As we recall the days gone by, we know the past is irretrievable. Yet through the gift of memory, we recapture treasured moments and images. We are thankful for the time we had with those who are no longer with us, with whom we lived and laughed and loved. And just as I say the words, if you do the response, we remember them. At the rising of the sun and at its going down,
We remember them.
at the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, at the opening of the buds and in the rebirth of spring,
We remember them.
at the blueness of the skies and the warmth of summer, the rustling of the leaves and the beauty of autumn, at the beginning of the year and when it ends.
We remember them.
When we are weary and in need of strength, when we are lost and sick at heart, when we have joy we crave to share.
We remember them.
As long as we live, they too will live, for they are part of us. Thank you so much for coming today. We really appreciate it. And please join us in the front of the old church and we'll take a group photo.